I'll never forget the day I found out there was a name for what was wrong with me, for the weird behaviors and emotions that I couldn't seem to stop, and for the mistakes that I kept making over and over again. The name of it is complex PTSD, which is the kind that comes from chronic exposure to intense stress, usually in childhood. It can happen in adulthood, but the thing I'm focusing on are the wounds of trauma that happened when you were a kid. And especially, my life changed when I learned the word for the core symptom of this kind of PTSD, neurological dysregulation. Now, I had lived most of my life dysregulated and thinking it was just me. I would get discombobulated or numb or too intense, and I'd get clumsy. I'd trip over myself and drop things. So I learned about CPTSD and dysregulation, and I learned how to get re-regulated, and I felt so different. I thought nothing bad was ever going to get into my life again. But the thing is, like all people, and especially like all people who have lived through trauma in childhood, I had self-defeating behaviors. Now, I knew this, and I knew it for a long time. And I thought it was just because I was a bad person. I was ashamed about it. And then I learned that it was actually very normal for people who had trauma. Still, though, I didn't know what to do about it. So what I learned was when you learn to re-regulate your nervous system, it can get better. And if you've watched even one of my videos before, you know I'm always talking about the importance of re-regulation. And I teach how to do that. You can find my course on that or my book, Re-Regulated, down below in the description section. But the problem was, even though I was re-regulating, I kept doing things that would knock me back from a re-regulated state back into dysregulation. And I'm talking about self-defeating behaviors, which I'm going to list here for you so that you can see if you have any of them. When I was dysregulated, my self-defeating behaviors would just get activated. That's what happens. If you don't get dysregulated, they don't tend to activate. They might. Everybody has some of them. But dysregulation makes it so much harder to control. They just leak out. They get bigger than they should be. So I had to learn to re-regulate. And I had to learn to face honestly how I was sabotaging myself. Because as bad as my childhood trauma was, I was keeping the effects of my trauma alive with my self-defeating behaviors. I was re-traumatizing myself. Now, I wasn't totally clear that I was doing them, and I was definitely fuzzy on how to stop. But the first step is just naming them. You name them. You probably don't have all of them, but you name the ones that you do resonate with, and you write them down. And you pick one or two that you can start working on. And then when you do, things get better. Now, some of these aren't such a big deal, and some of them are huge and they can ruin your life. It's a matter of degrees. They always start as an innocent way of getting out of pain. All self-defeating behavior, you're just trying to get out of pain. But if you keep using the behavior to try to get out of pain, pretty soon the pain gets bigger. And if you don't find a way to change that self-defeating behavior, it will create more pain and more life problems and keep you re-traumatized in a way that totally blocks your healing. So this is the hardest thing to face, to acknowledge that today, a lot of what's hurting you and holding you back is not your parents, not anymore, not because of anything that happened to you, not anymore. Today, what's happening is your own behavior. And the worse you were hurt back then, the more likely it is that you have a pattern of hurting yourself now. And it's not your fault what happened to you or that you ended up affected by that. But now every bit of your courage is going to be needed because there are things that only you can change. Self-defeating behaviors are those things. These are things like the people you allow into your life, the way you take care of yourself, the choices that you make about partners and jobs and money and where you live, and the people you admire, and the things you say, and of course, the way you act. It's easy peasy to spot this in other people, but it can be really hard to see it in ourselves. We go into denial. We defend ourselves that what we're doing is necessary. I'm self-medicating. I have to. But it doesn't actually make things better. That's the nature of a self-defeating behavior. It defeats you. Changing is what makes things better. And I teach this because for me, this was the hardest part of healing. And I mean, yes, the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid was harmful. It was not okay. But in the end, it was the stuff that I was doing to myself, the bad relationships, chain smoking, the lashing out at people. That's what was taking my life down and keeping me from healing as an adult. And if you've taken my courses, you've probably heard my story. Well, I wasn't getting better for a long time because of all the hurtful situations that I kept putting myself into. I didn't know any better, but I was dragging other people into them, and it was just problem after problem. And then I changed. And it's not like I'm a perfect person, never have been, never will be. I'm a work in progress, just like you. But if you're stuck in a pattern, I get it. I do understand stuck and patterns, and I'm here to show you a better way. Okay, so if you want to hear some of these self-defeating behaviors and ask yourself if there are any priorities that you don't want to do anymore, let's go through them. Now, remember, you're not going to have all of these, but you might have some, and some will be worse than others. So you can ask yourself if you relate to any of these. Number 1, black and white thinking. So traumatized people are often drawn to extreme views and, strong authority figures and groups who follow gurus. You might notice that you're often outraged about current events, and God knows the news is there to add fuel to the fire. They want outrage. So when we engage in that, we're sort of inviting it in. But that outrage is activating dysregulation and perhaps self-defeating behavior. As a traumatized person, just remember you may be extra vulnerable to outrage. And, it does feel good sometimes when you're depressed to get mad. But it's the lowest grade antidepressant there is. So if you get to the point that you find that you're losing your freedom to disagree with people and stay friends, or you're losing your freedom to leave a particularly dominant person, or maybe that you are the dominant person, or you're talking smack about other people and trying to get other people to agree with you, or you're trying to hurt their reputation, or you're cutting off contact with people who are outside of your opinion bubble, you may be veering off into black and white thinking to the degree that it's a self-defeating behavior. All right. Number 2, neglect of your body. You might find that for reasons bigger than the limits of your income, you're wearing shabby clothes, or you have poor hygiene, or you don't exercise. People who struggled in childhood are prone to do this. And sometimes we neglect medical and dental care, even when we can afford it. At the extreme, though, neglecting our body and our health can become self-harm. And so at that point, it becomes a very clear self-defeating behavior. Number 3 is the addictive use of food. Yes, food. This includes everything from carrying a whole lot of extra weight, to having an eating disorder, not eating, to a tendency to indulge in large amounts of fast carbohydrates like sugar and flour and things that kind of put you in a food coma. Now, that kind of feeling can be calming at first. I know that is, in the past, has been one of my kind of drugs of choice, is just to numb out on a bunch of carbs. It helps. It feels like it helps anyway when you're dysregulated and you just want to calm down. But in the long run, it just makes you more dysregulated. It throws you off of a sort of steady energy level and ability to focus and pay attention. That is what makes life good and happy. Number 4 is the addictive use of media and entertainment. So do you watch TV or browse the internet or scroll your phone or play games enough that it's interfering with your sleep or your meals or your daily routine? Or do these forms of recreation cause problems for your family? Maybe you don't meet your responsibilities at work or fulfill your education or pay your bills because you're so sucked into your screens. That's a self-defeating behavior. Number 5 is dishonesty. And this includes things like exaggerating, hiding important personal truths or preferences, lying, stealing, cheating on a significant other, tax evasion, or any kind of illegal activity. The minute you're lying, you are losing your source. You're losing your connection to all that's good. And I recommend cutting it out immediately. Number 6 is work problems. And this includes staying stuck in unfulfilling work. Like work that is not meaningful to you, but maybe you're afraid to leave because the transition just feels overwhelming to you. It's self-defeating behavior to stay like that. although everybody gets there sometimes. Another one is under-earning, where you're not earning a fair and adequate wage to support yourself and your dependents. And it's very, very common for traumatized people to get stuck in under-earning. There's a fear of conflict for asking for enough money, and a fear of the pressure of doing a job that's a little more challenging that might pay a higher wage. And that's real until you have the skills to re-regulate enough that you can start to stretch the boundaries of your life and let it be bigger and take on tasks and jobs and relationships that do require the ability to self-regulate. But you can do that. This can also include avoiding employment, just staying out of it, not bothering with it, falling into ruin over it, having more than your share of conflicts with employers and coworkers. There's usually somebody like that in every workplace, but it's stuff like suing or getting sued, making accusations, like having that be the whole MO of somebody is a self-defeating behavior. Nobody wants to have a person like that around for long. Or acting in a way that makes coworkers feel intimidated or threatened or undermined. Number 7, and I've recently added this to the list because I talk about self-defeating behaviors a lot, but this is such a big one, procrastination. And this is really common with CPTSD. It's often a result of your nervous system being in freeze mode. And this is a trauma reaction that we don't totally have control over initially, but you can work on it. And in some other videos, you can learn about how to get out of freeze. The number one thing to do is to move your body. That's your immediate fix for feeling like you can't get out of procrastination. Is just to move your body, get outside and move around. And then, there are dozens of solutions out there for what you can do, for time management and getting things done. But really, when you realize that your nervous system is just like, your nervous system is playing possum, which is an old reaction from your brain to being under stress. So this can result, though, it has terrible consequences, whatever the causes are. You miss deadlines, you don't pay bills, you don't follow through on tasks at home and at work where other people are counting on you. And overall, you feel exhausted and unmotivated when mentally you want to be moving forward in your life. Number 8, and I also just added it to my list of self-defeating behaviors, if you can believe it. I talk about self-defeating behaviors a lot, and I talk about clutter a lot, but clutter belongs here. Now, clutter also is a symptom of trauma, a sign of trauma, but it's also a re-traumatizer. So it includes the accumulation of stuff in your living space or yard to the point that it becomes unhygienic, it's gross, it's uncleanable, it's such a mess that you don't even know where to begin, or it prevents you from using rooms in your home or having company over, either because you don't have space for them to sit, or you just feel too ashamed to show them what's going on. So the tendency to clutter can also be mental or emotional, where problems you haven't dealt with are piled up, and it discourages you from facing the problem or talking to the people involved or getting involved in anything new. You feel so burdened by the mental energy that's just getting drained from you all the time by unsolved problems with people and problems. So clutter can also take the form of an overfull schedule, where you fill your empty time with activities out of fear of loneliness or a sense of anxiety when you have time to relax or be alone. So you just are always going until you're stressing yourself out. It defeats you. Number 9 is blame. And this includes having a hard time seeing your own role in problems. It's victim thinking. It's bitterness. It's casually saying things about other people that hurt their reputation. Terrible thing to do. There's a word for that, calumny. It's a very bad thing to do, to try to get other people to see and agree with some terrible thing you've said about people, especially when you're not certain it's true. So blame can also be believing that all of your problems are because of this one thing. It could be racism or sexism or foreigners or one or another political party, or certain foods, or certain approaches to education, or some medical thing. And, these things all can be problems, big problems, but they're not the only problem. And if it's clouding your ability to see that there is something in this tangle of problems that you do have control over, then it's a self-defeating behavior. Number 10 is numbing with substances like alcohol and drugs. And I don't really need to define this or explain why it can undermine your healing, except to say that if it's happening, it is a very high priority to heal, because basically everything else is going to sit there and be a problem and perhaps become a worse problem over time, as long as you don't address the substance abuse. Number 11 is irritability. And we get angry sometimes for no reason. We get into arguments and ranting in the car, online, face to face. And in the extreme, this can include rage attacks and even violence. That is an absolute must stop. The irritability and rage will do more harm to your life and your relationships faster than just about anything else. Number 12 is the attraction to troubled partners and friends. Now, people who were abused or neglected as children are often attracted to people who were themselves traumatized, including those who have high levels of drama, ongoing major problems, conflicts, serious legal and financial problems, and they import problems into your life. So when that's who you feel at home with, it's almost certain that your life is going to be full of problems. Number 13 is unfulfilling romantic relationships. Now, you may avoid dating relationships altogether, thinking you're just taking a little break and one day you'll get back to it, but then you look and it's been 7 years. That could be a self-defeating behavior. You might stay in bad relationships where there's no intimacy or there's even emotional or physical abuse. And you might be doing this to avoid the pain that you would go through from ending the relationship. It's so common for traumatized people because that abandonment wound makes the cost of leaving even terrible relationships very high, or feel that way. But with support, you can do it. Number 14 is the abuse of your sexuality. And this can include an overly sexualized appearance or inappropriately seductive behavior in situations where that is not a good thing for other people or for you. And as a result of your upbringing, you may have a distorted sense of the messages that you're sending, or poorly developed boundaries, hard to recognize, what's comfortable and okay with somebody in your presence, and when you might be crossing those boundaries and making them uncomfortable or even feel threatened. Number 15 is fantasy. Now, this also can be a self-defeating behavior. People say, oh, fantasy, it's harmless, it's wonderful. Not always. It can go too far. And this includes things like romantic obsession or limerence. For example, obsessing on what it would be like to be with someone who you're not with and who has told you to please leave them alone, or fantasizing about a successful future that you're not pursuing in any realistic way, but it dominates your thoughts and your identity. You've basically checked out of the real world, which is where the pursuit of good things can ever actually happen. So to the degree that you do this, you're not going to be present. You're not going to be in touch with reality. You're not going to be able to take reasonable actions to go for what you want. And in the extreme, it can go so far as stalking or delusional thinking. Number 16 is avoidance, and this can take the form of avoiding people, avoiding responsibilities, and avoiding participation in groups where you kind of belong. And it can also take the form of social, sexual, and emotional anorexia. You may have never heard of that, but that's the word for when people are depriving themselves of needed contact with other people, and distorted thinking is going on that makes it seem like this is virtuous or healing or helpful. Now, I know that sometimes taking a break from people or from dating is how we bring ourselves back together, but it can go too far, and that's when it becomes a self-defeating behavior. Number 17 is debting, and by that I mean getting into debt. And while financial hardship can happen to anybody, and financial stability is never guaranteed, debt can become a self-defeating behavior when you're living beyond your means to pay for a place to live, and transportation and clothes and recreation. And again, I know that there are situations in life where you still need those things and you do not have the means. But when I say debting, I'm talking about you do have the means, but an extravagant limit is sort of taking over your concept of what it's okay to spend, and you're getting yourself in trouble and defeating your freedom. Trauma can interfere with your ability to consistently earn a living and your ability to evaluate consequences for overspending. Also, if you're like me and you grew up poor, you get a kind of weird sense of like, maybe if I had this furniture or this place to live, it would solve this anxiety I feel, or I would feel more like I fit in. But there's a balance there. In some of the worst forms, debting can turn into a gambling addiction or unsustainable get-rich-quick mentality stuff. And it can also lead to foreclosure and bankruptcy and ultimately homelessness. Number 18 is a habit of repeating traumatic patterns. Now, this happens because of the neurological injury. How many times have you made a terrible mistake and swore to yourself, you'll never do it again? And then before you know you've done it again, you're doing it again. Okay, that is so common for people with trauma. And it has to do with brain functioning and how we react to stress and decision-making and the prediction of risk. So it's there. It's kind of part of the atmosphere for us, but we can change it. So we struggle at times to see red flags and to step back from where trouble appears, to recognize somebody as a sick and dangerous person. This blind spot, though, can leave you vulnerable to ever worsening harm. That is how it happens. And it can give you worse symptoms that are difficult to heal. So this list, it may sound overwhelming. It may sound like it's just blaming you or dumping so much responsibility on you. And again, it is not your fault you have trauma. But what you do now to change these self-defeating behaviors can make a tremendous difference. You don't have to change everything at once. If you can identify one self-defeating behavior and begin working to adjust it, it can make all the difference in your life, and it can make it easier to make the next change and then the next one. Healing is possible. You only need to start. And if you want a list of the self-defeating behaviors that I just mentioned in this video, you can download it right here for free. And I will see you very soon.